In the mysterious temples of ancient Egypt, what seems like nightmare rituals were daily acts of devotion. Priests raised innocent kittens only to sacrifice them as sacred offerings, while massive Nile crocodiles, worshipped as gods, were ritually killed and mummified. For the Egyptians, death was not the end, but a gateway to eternal life, and preserving the body through gruesome rituals was essential for the soul's survival. In this video, we uncover 6 terrifying practices that once blurred the line between horror and holiness in the land of the pharaohs. But before we dive into the details, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. The animals were divine in Egypt, and their worship took shocking forms. Bubastis, the ancient city devoted to the goddess Bastet, has revealed the remains of millions of mummified cats buried in her honor. Pilgrims traveled there with offerings, tiny cat mummies, intricately wrapped as gifts. Priests even ran commercial cat farms, breeding and slaughtering kittens to meet demand. Archaeologists have found many of those votive cat burials contained young kittens' bodies, often hastily killed so the goddess might hear the people's prayers. Down the Nile, Sobek, the crocodile god, ruled a bloodier cult. In Komombo's temple, a sacred pool was filled with living crocodiles. Far from pampering them, temple priests raised these Nile predators to slaughter. Once fattened, the crocs were ritually killed and mummified and interred in large cemeteries. Indeed, millions of animal mummies, cats, crocodiles, ibises, and more filled graves across, not as pets in death, but as sacrificial substitutes for the faithful. To us, it seems strange and terrifying. To Egyptians, these beasts embodied their gods and the cycle of life. Egyptian royalty often kept the throne in the family. The Ptolemaic rulers formally adopted the custom of brother-sister marriage. Cleopatra VII herself took 2 of her younger brothers as husbands, Ptolemy the 13th and 14th, before later loving Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. This was not taboo to them, but tradition. Marrying a sibling maintained the godlike purity of the royal line. Earlier pharaohs too had incestuous unions. For example, Akhenaten married his half-sister Nefertiti and had children with daughters. For the Egyptians, pharaohs were gods on earth. What might sicken outsiders was simply part of divine protocol. Such marriages were routine events at court, accepted by society and believed to ensure cosmic stability. Funerary rituals in ancient Egypt blended mystery with a hint of the macabre. At the entrance to a tomb, priests performed the opening of the mouth ceremony, a sacred act that symbolically reawakened the senses of the dead. Using a special blade called a peseshkef, originally a tool for cutting umbilical cords, the priest touched the mummy's lips and eyes. This gesture opened the mouth and eyes, allowing the deceased to see, speak, breathe, and eat in the afterlife. To us, it may seem unsettling, reviving a corpse's senses with a ceremonial knife. But for the Egyptians, death wasn't the end. It was a rebirth. That's why they used symbols of childbirth, like the very tool used to cut a newborn's cord, to emphasize that the soul was being born again into eternity. After these rites, the soul's real journey began. Guided by spells from the Book of the Dead, the deceased had to navigate the underworld and face a final judgment. In spell 125, the heart of the dead was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. A tribunal of 42 divine judges listened as the soul recited a long list of moral confessions, and they act hypocritically in their sins and feel disgrace because of them. If the heart was heavier than the feather, it meant the soul was impure. In that case, the monstrous goddess Amit, part lion, crocodile, and hippo, would devour it, and the soul would be erased forever. But if the heart was light and true, the soul passed into the field of reeds, an eternal paradise. Even the living in ancient Egypt carried symbols of deeper meaning. Some women were found to have tattooed amulets, sacred markings etched into their skin. One priestess from Deir el-Medina bore several eyes of Horus on her neck and shoulders, a powerful safeguard against evil. These watchful symbols seemed to protect her from every direction. Other tattoos included lotus flowers, cows, and baboons, all linked to deities like Hathor. These weren't decorative. They were permanent spells worn on the body, and in that sense, tattoos acted as personal amulets, blending faith and protection in one form. Pharaohs followed the same logic. Symbols were painted on coffins and spells inscribed on linen bandages. Ramses's sarcophagus is covered in such protective imagery. To the ancient Egyptians, magic wasn't separate from the body, but it lived in the flesh. A long time ago, in the earliest days of ancient Egypt, death wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a new kind of service. Pharaohs believed that in the afterlife, they would still need their staff, their cupbearers, their musicians, their officials. So when a king died, his servants were expected to follow. Literally, they were buried with him. Some killed, others left to starve, so they could continue serving him in the next world. It was a dark practice called retainer sacrifice, and it faded after Egypt's first dynasty. Even by ancient standards, it was extreme. But the Egyptians didn't give up on the idea of afterlife service. They just found a more symbolic and less bloody way to do it. Instead of sacrificing real people, they started making Shabti dolls. These small figures, carved from wood or stone, were meant to come to life in the afterlife. Each one was inscribed with a magical spell, commanding it to do the hard work, especially farming. Rich Egyptians packed their tombs with them. Some had 365 Shabti, one for each day of the year, plus 36 little overseers holding whips to keep them in line. Even after the pharaohs were gone, some ancient beliefs that never really died. In Roman and Islamic Egypt, old and new traditions blended. In medieval Cairo, families washed their dead in detailed ceremonies. Much like the purification rites of ancient Egypt, people wore Quranic amulets for protection, or even scarabs, just like their ancestors once placed Shabtis in tombs. Even today, echoes remain. Lizards still scurry over crumbling tombs. Long ago, Egyptians believed cats were sacred. Killing one could bring a curse. The world changed, but Egypt's deep connection between the magical and the everyday lived on. The past is full of strange stories. Some make us wonder and some make us uneasy, but all of them remind us that humans have always searched for meaning. In life, in death, and beyond. There's still more to discover, so if you're curious, stay with us and see you in the next one.